Back in 1956, the big studio MGM chopped out an 11-minute scene from the movie Forbidden Planet that nobody was ever supposed to see in theaters. The scene was about the young actress Anne Francis and her pet tiger. It had stuff about staying pure, having power, and an old fairy tale idea that freaked out the movie censors big time. For years and years, only a couple of people even knew that scene existed. That scene told why the tiger suddenly tries to attack Altera right after she gets her first kiss. But the reason was way too spicy for people watching movies in the 1950s. What MGM hid actually shows a pretty dark secret about what the whole movie is really saying. Way back in 1952, two guys who painted backgrounds for movies and who had never written a script before walked into MGM with a story they called Fatal Planet. The two guys, Irving Block and Alan Adler, weren't taken seriously at all. Back then, sci-fi movies were seen as junk, cheap trash where studios dumped old actors in recycled monster costumes. But their idea was different. These dudes didn't think in words, they thought in cool pictures. They imagined a planet that wasn't just a location, but a giant painting full of scary stuff, wonder, quiet, and crazy future tech. MGM said no at first, but the idea stuck in their heads. By 1954, things had changed. Bosses at the studio couldn't ignore how huge TV was getting or how everybody was curious about space. So MGM took a chance and dug the idea out of the trash. That dusty old pitch got pulled from a drawer and quietly turned into the movie we now call Forbidden Planet. It became one of the most expensive sci-fi movies ever made back then. MGM didn't just say okay, they went all in. They spent somewhere between $1.9 and $2 million on a type of movie that usually only got $150,000 to maybe $500,000. The studio wasn't just making another sci-fi flick. They wanted to make the genre look fancy. They built brand new sets from the ground up. The actors weren't washed up old stars. They picked hot new talents like Leslie Nielsen and Anne Francis, plus the super serious Walter Pidgeon to give it weight. Every single dollar went into making a genre nobody respected look totally amazing. MGM's big move was so bold that the whole movie industry kinda stopped and stared for a minute. Was it a dumb risk or the start of something new? Even inside MGM, the bosses whispered about how much money they were burning. But the risk paid off. The movie didn't just make its money back, it changed what sci-fi could be for studios. It proved you didn't have to make space stuff cheap to make it awesome. At first, the story was set in 1972, but the tech in the script felt way too crazy for anything close to real life. So they pushed the story 200 years ahead, all the way to the 23rd century, on a faraway planet called Altair 4. The main plot quietly copied Shakespeare's play The Tempest. Dr. Morbius was like a space-age Prospero. His daughter Altaira was basically Miranda. Even the monsters weren't regular monsters. They came straight out of people's minds, dragged up from the hidden subconscious, just like the angry spirits in Shakespeare's play. Mixing fancy literature with cheap sci-fi made the movie special. It wasn't only lasers and spaceships. It was really about power, ego, control, and fears so deep inside your brain that even the stars couldn't get away from them. MGM gave the directing job to Fred M. Wilcox, a guy who had never done sci-fi before. His biggest movie was Lassie Come Home. People thought that was weird, but MGM didn't want some crazy genius. They wanted someone super organized who could handle a huge cast, giant sets, and a tight schedule. Wilcox nailed it. Coming from outside sci-fi made everything feel weirder in the coolest way. He didn't shoot it like a normal space movie, he shot it like Shakespeare happening in space. No jokes, no winking at the audience, no breaking the mood. He took it dead serious. That seriousness made the wild story feel real. He let the special effects look awesome, but always kept the focus on the people's faces. The script got a big glow-up from writer Cyril Hume. He took Bloch and Adler's picture ideas and made them way deeper. Freud's ideas about the mind started sneaking in. The monsters stopped being just scary creatures. They became symbols of hidden feelings and wants that came straight from Dr. Morbius's own brain. Hume didn't only write lines, he added tons of book-smart, mind-bendy, and mythical layers. The story started talking about old pain, being scared of power, and how knowing too much can destroy you. It wasn't really about aliens. It was about the dark, scary parts of people hidden behind shiny future machines. Walter Pidgeon was 58 when MGM asked him to play Dr. Morbius. He had spent years doing classy, serious roles. Sci-fi wasn't his thing at all. He almost turned it down. What made him say yes wasn't the space stuff. It was the huge $1.9 million budget and a script that felt like The Tempest. Pidgeon got it right away. It wasn't silly. It was a warning. He took the role, and because he did, he gave the movie the grown-up vibe it needed. He kept all the crazy stuff grounded. Anne Francis was only 23 when she showed up on set wearing what people later called the first miniskirt in movies. Her outfits, made by designer Helen Rose, shocked everybody. They came out almost 10 years before Mary Quant made miniskirts famous. The studio bosses got nervous. Spain banned the whole movie until 1967. Some old-fashioned theaters refused to show it, but the look stayed. Barefoot, sweet, super futuristic, Altera became an icon not just because she was pretty, but because she broke all the rules. Francis didn't just wear the future, she became it. Leslie Nielsen played Commander Adams, the tough but good leader of the spaceship crew. Way before he did comedy, he was the serious guy. He looked perfect standing on the bridge of a spaceship. His character was kinda like the preview of Captain Kirk later on. Nielsen joked later that the real star was Robbie the Robot, and honestly, he wasn't wrong. Warren Stevens played Doc Ostro, the guy who figures everything out too late. His last words, monsters from the id, hit the audience like a truck in 1956. Most people back then didn't even know what the id was, but they felt the creepiness. His character dies off-screen, quiet and awful. He tried the ancient Krell machine, and it totally broke him. Stevens said it all super calm, which made it even scarier. The monster wasn't out in space. It was inside us. Robbie the Robot didn't talk with his own voice. Actor Marvin Miller did the voice but got zero credit. Inside the suit was a stunt guy named Frankie Darro. Darro could only last so long. After a couple drinks at lunch, he almost fell over in the middle of a scene and got fired. But the voice and the moves still came together perfectly, and Robbie became a legend. He wasn't just a robot. He had personality, friendly, dangerous, mysterious all at once. The movie's very first showing wasn't even in Hollywood. It happened March 3rd and 4th, 1956, at a sci-fi convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. The fancy Hollywood premiere came later on March 23rd at Grauman's Chinese Theater. That kind of big rollout was super rare for sci-fi. Most space movies just quietly showed up late at night, but Forbidden Planet opened huge with giant CinemaScope screens and fancy stereo sound. It played for 6 whole months at Grauman's. MGM treated it like a giant epic. When the CR edits rolled for the music, they didn't say score by. They called it Electronic Tonalities by Lewis and B.B. Barron. Union rules wouldn't let them call it real music. The Barons didn't play guitars or pianos. They built weird electrical circuits. They made sounds by breaking stuff, loops, screechy feedback, static. By 1956 rules, it wasn't music, but it changed everything anyway. Reviews were all over the place. Some critics had no clue what to think. The New Yorker thought it was one big joke. British reviewers were nicer but still confused. The Shakespeare stuff, the brain science, the monsters, it didn't all fit neatly. Some people saw genius, others just saw colorful robots. But the confusion didn't stop the movie from getting more and more respected over time. It didn't need everyone to love it right away. It was made to last. The movie made $1.53 million in the US and Canada, plus another $1.2 to $1.35 million overseas. That added up to almost $3 million total, with a small profit of about $210,000. Not a flop, but not the giant hit MGM dreamed of. It came in as the 30th biggest American movie of 1956. Pretty good, but the money wasn't the real story. The real stuff happened later. In 1957, it got nominated for Best Special Effects at the Oscars. It didn't win. The Ten Commandments took it. But Forbidden Planet didn't need the statue. Its monster was drawn with light. Its skies were hand-painted. The effects were real. built by hand, super weird and cool. Just getting nominated proved something in movies had changed. In Forbidden Planet, there used to be a scene that tried to explain something the audience never totally got. It was quiet, full of symbols, and kinda disturbing. Around minute 11, Doc Ostro talks about Altera and her tiger. He says only a virgin can calm a unicorn, and he notices Altera can pet and boss around a full-grown tiger without being scared. That scene got completely cut. MGM sliced it out clean. The strict movie rules back then said the whole virgin unicorn idea was too sexy. The thought that a girl's purity gave her magic power over animals? No way were they letting that hit theaters in 1956. When Altera kisses Commander Adams for the first time, her tiger flips out and attacks her. No warning. The pet that used to sleep peacefully next to her suddenly sees her as danger. In the final movie, there's zero explanation. It just looks like random animal violence, but it totally wasn't. The deleted scene made it clear. That first kiss, that moment she starts growing up romantically, ended her special power over the tiger. Just like old stories where the unicorn runs away the second the girl isn't innocent anymore. When the tiger jumps at her, it's not only about danger, it's about growing up, losing something forever, and big changes you can't undo. For years, the only place you could find that scene was in a book. The novel version of Forbidden Planet, written by Philip MacDonald using the name W.J. Stewart, came out in 1956 before the movie. The book kept the unicorn line word for word. It explained exactly how Altera's purity kept the tiger calm. Most people who read the book thought it was just the author adding cool stuff. They had no idea the scene was actually filmed and then hidden. For almost 20 years, nobody outside MGM saw any proof it was shot. MGM had a strict rule: destroy every rough copy. They didn't want different versions leaking out. But somehow, Forbidden Planet's rough copy survived. In 1977, someone found the old work print in a dusty storage room. It had the unicorn scene. It had extra takes, different lines, raw sound. Nobody knows why it wasn't destroyed. Maybe someone forgot. Maybe someone just couldn't burn it. But it lived, and when people found it again, everything changed. That old copy got cleaned up and restored. First, it showed up on a fancy Criterion Laserdisc, then on the 50th anniversary DVD, and later on Blu-ray. Fans who grew up with the normal version finally saw what was missing. The kiss, the tiger, the old myth, it all made sense. Altera wasn't just a pretty space girl, she was a walking symbol. Her story was full of layers about staying innocent, waking up to grown-up feelings, and lines Hollywood wasn't ready to cross back then. And there was another thing that caused huge drama in 1956. Altera had a swimming scene where she floats alone in the water like a dream. It looked like she had no clothes on. Rumors flew fast. Anne Francis naked in a sci-fi movie. But she wasn't. She wore a skin-colored bodysuit. It was super thin, no seams, made to look like bare skin under lights and moving water. The trick worked way too well. People got mad. Church groups wrote angry letters. Some theaters pulled the movie. MGM had to put out statements saying, no, Anne Francis was never naked, nothing bad happened. But lots of people didn't believe them. They swore it was real skin. The cameraman, George Folsey, used perfect lighting, kept shadows away, hid every edge of the suit, and let the water do the rest. He turned a simple suit into a giant scandal. Even the crew was shocked at how real it looked. MGM wanted to push limits without actually breaking rules. They managed to do both. In 1972, when MGM tried to bring the movie back for kids' Saturday shows, they cut more than 6 minutes. The swimming scene was gone. Flirty talking was gone. Anything a tiny bit grown up. The version kids saw that year was super tame and got a G rating, but it lost all the edge. For years, little kids only knew the baby version. It took a long time before people could see the real uncut movie again. Spain wouldn't let the movie play at all. For over 10 years, Forbidden Planet was banned there. The censors under dictator Franco hated Anne Francis's short skirts and that swimming scene. It wasn't the words, monsters, or spaceship, it was her outfits. Skirts too short, eggs too visible. The movie didn't play in Spain until 1967. By then it was already a classic everywhere else, but in Spain it was still seen as dangerous. Anne Francis almost wore something way more covered up. The costume lady, Helen Rose, made a shiny silver jumpsuit that hid everything from neck to toes. It even had a hood, silver gloves, and clear shoes. But when the big boss Dor Shari saw it, he said, "No way, too revealing." He actually said it was too sexy, even though it showed zero skin. It was tight and shiny, and that was enough to get it banned from the movie. The jumpsuit was never filmed. Only test pictures still exist. Behind all the drama and deep meanings was a crazy technical trick most people never noticed. The desert in the background wasn't a real desert. It was a giant 350-foot curved painting hanging inside a soundstage, stage 15. It looked like an endless alien world, but the lighting had to be perfect. The painted sun had to match the fake sunlights on set. If anything was off, the whole trick fell apart. The cameraman lit that painting with 40 huge skylights, each holding 10 1,000-watt bulbs, plus 96 giant K10 lights and 192 K5s, pulling so much electricity they had to steal power from other stages. That one background needed a whole team of electricians. Then there was the spaceship. Designer Arthur Lonergan built a 51-meter-wide flying saucer that filled the entire stage. It was 167 feet across, basically the size of a building. It blew the actors away. MGM bosses walked on set, saw it, and instantly said, "Okay, we're spending more money." The final cost hit $2 million. Back then, that was insane for sci-fi. But the giant ship wasn't just a prop. It showed everyone they were serious. It made everyone work harder. They used 4 of MGM's biggest sound stages at the same time, something no movie had ever done. Each stage held a different part of the planet. The spaceship, the Krell lab, the control room, the rocky ground, all 4 stages ran at once. Crews worked crazy overlapping shifts, building, shooting, tearing stuff down. It never stopped. The pressure was brutal and everything had to line up perfectly. This wasn't just another cheap space movie. It was like building a whole new world on a construction site. Inside the spaceship, they made a 16-foot clear plastic globe. It had 2 shells with glowing metal rings running through. It reflected everything. Lights, cameras, people, all of it. To get one clean shot, they had to cover lights, hide gear, move crew, block reflections. It took hours just for one camera angle. That globe became famous on set, a beautiful pain in the butt. Then there was the Krell laboratory. It wasn't just some blinking lights. It had 50,000 feet of wires, 12,500 feet of neon tubes, and over 1,000 square yards of clear plastic. 15 electricians ran it. They used 110 different switches to make panels flash, lights pulse, and circuits look alive. The power need was so huge they stole electricity from other stages again. Every single switch mattered. Colors changed mid-scene. Pulses sped up or slowed down. It looked like alien brains working, but it was just hard-working people doing it by hand. Everything in Forbidden Planet was way bigger and crazier than it looked. The lost scenes, the secret meanings, the outfits that made people freak out, the sets that sucked up whole power plants. For years, people watched the movie and had no idea what they were missing. But those missing pieces, those quiet cuts, are exactly why finding them later felt like opening a secret door. In 1956, MGM spent $125,000, that's 7% of the whole budget, just to build one robot. That robot was Robbie. He wasn't some side prop. He was a main star. Most sci-fi movies back then couldn't even dream of spending that much on their entire film. Today, that would be about $1.2 million. And every penny went into something that couldn't breathe or talk by itself. But Robbie moved, blinked, spun, flashed lights, and talked with spinning gears. His head was a clear dome full of turning balls, spinning gyros, and little lights. Everything moved together like he was really alive. The first guy inside the suit was stuntman Frankie Darro. It was awful. The robot was 7 feet tall, heavy metal and rubber, pitch black inside, super hot, and no air. The head had live electricity. Frankie once tried shooting after a couple martinis and almost tipped the whole thing over. The studio was not happy. Every step hurt. Every move made him sweat buckets. And none of that suffering even showed on camera. Even after the movie, Robbie kept working. MGM wanted their money back, so they sent him on tour. He got his own movie called The Invisible Boy in 1957. Then he popped up on TV shows, The Twilight Zone, Lost in Space, Columbo, The Addams Family, The Love Boat, even Mork Mindy. He was like a fun surprise every time he showed up. Sometimes freshly painted, sometimes with new wires. But the shape always stayed the same. He even appeared with Bugs Bunny in a Looney Tunes movie in 2003. It wasn't just cameos, it was a whole second career. People called him the hardest working robot in Hollywood. But Robbie was more than metal. He had rules. Dr. Morbius, the guy who built him in the story, programmed him with the same 3 laws Isaac Asimov made up for robots. Never hurt humans, always obey orders, protect yourself, but never break the first 2 rules. Those rules drove the plot. When the invisible id monster attacks, Robbie freezes. His circuits lock up. He can't move because he knows deep down the monster is part of Morbius. If he fights the monster, he'd be fighting his own creator. It was one of the first times a movie robot cared about right and wrong, not just orders, and it changed sci-fi forever. That wasn't the only new thing Forbidden Planet did. Its music wasn't made with normal instruments. It was 100% electronic. Louis and Bibi Baron built their own weird machines. No violins, no piano, just electricity and buzzing. It was the very first movie with a completely electronic soundtrack. It wasn't just background tunes, it was the mood, the tension, the whole creepy vibe. The Barons didn't even call it music, they called it electronic tonalities because the musicians' union said it didn't count as real music. The union said if no human played a regular instrument, it wasn't music. So even though they invented something totally new, the Barons got second-class credit. Making it was rough. Every circuit they built could only be used once. Each had its own sound and short life. When a circuit finally blew up and died, they recorded that dying noise. That screech became part of the score. Bibi Baron had to sit for hours cutting and sticking hundreds of tiny tape pieces by hand. No computer, no undo, just scissors and glue. She later said it was a horrible job, but without her work, the sounds would be gone forever. Every single beep was one of a kind. You could never make it again. Their whole idea came from a scientist named Norbert Wiener and his theories about machines thinking. The Barons believed machines were kinda alive. Their circuits reacted, changed, grew old, and died. Each circuit had a life story, beginning, middle, end. That made the machines co-writers of the music. Every weird sound was a moment of life caught before the circuit burned out. While the music buzzed and hummed, the monster on screen roared. The id monster wasn't a guy in a rubber suit, it was hand-drawn animation by Disney legend Joshua Meador. Every single frame was drawn on special paper, one by one. It took months. The monster was just a glowing outline, almost invisible unless it walked through the spaceship's force field. It looked creepy, scary, and impossible to keto. Even the censors thought it was too frightening. Some wanted parts cut. That almost never happened to an invisible monster. But this one got under people's skin. Maybe because it wasn't a creature. It was an idea. The idea came from Freud. The monster was the hidden part of the mind, the id, full of raw anger, desire, and fear we all keep buried. Morbius had no clue he was making it. He thought the ancient Krell machine was safe, but it read his secret thoughts. Not just the thoughts he knew about, the ones he hid even from himself. And those hidden thoughts turned into a real killer monster. The Krell had built machines that made thoughts come true, powered by over 9,000 underground nuclear reactors. But they never put a safety switch on feelings. So when their own secret fears came alive, the whole Krell race died. All of them, in one single night. The exact same thing almost happened again. Morbius used the Krell machine. When he got jealous, the monster came back. That's why Robbie couldn't stop it. That's why guns didn't work. They were fighting someone's mind. The monster was Morbius, his pain, his wants, his denial. Everything he refused to face made the monster stronger. Even Altera wasn't safe. Morbius's daughter was right in the middle. Her sweet innocence, her new romance with Commander Adams, it poked something dark inside her dad. Something messed up. He never said it out loud. But when Altera kissed another guy, the monster went nuts. Morbius didn't call the monster on purpose. He was the monster. His subconscious was fighting to keep control. The jealousy, the possessiveness, the rage, it all showed up in the most Freud-like way possible. Later, movie experts pointed out the creepy father-daughter vibes. The monster didn't really want to hurt Altara. It wanted to protect her from every other person. And in the end, the person it destroyed, the M, lost was Morbius himself.